Everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. It's great to have everybody here, and we appreciate your attendance. I think just looking quick to see if we have a quorum present. I think we do have a quorum present, so I'm going to declare a quorum present. We typically do a quick kind of a lightning round of introductions at the beginning, and it's just really to sort of say your name and affiliation so that folks that are here, if you want to connect with somebody that's affiliated in this particular space, you kind of know who you're talking to. I've never found an effective way to do that online, so I apologize to the online folks. We usually just do that for the folks that are here in person, but maybe we could start over here with Leland, and we'll go around the table, and then we'll go out to the audience. Thanks.
My name is Leland Myers. I'm a sewer person.
Sewer or SUA, just for the record?
Sewer.
Okay. Thanks, Leland.
Darren Hess with Weber Basin Water, and I represent public water suppliers.
Good morning, Jessica Wade, and I'm the field manager for Salt Lake Field Office, Bureau of Land Management.
Jim Harris, Division of Water Quality.
Angela Gong, Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Okay, Tim Hawks, and in this capacity, I represent aquaculture, the brine shrimp industry.
John Crofts, Davis County Commissioner.
Jeff Richards, Migratory Bird Production Areas. Ryan Doherty, representing Tualatin County.
Heidi Hoven, National Audubon Society's Gilmore Sanctuary.
Brad Perry from the Northwestern Band of Shoshone Nation, representing the tribes.
Okay, and then let's go right here, Adam.
Adam Wickline, National Audubon Society and Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust.
Bronte DeRoshi, Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust.
Marcel Shoup, Saline Lakes Program for National Audubon Society.
Lynn DeFreitas, Friends of Great Salt Lake.
Hi, good morning. Hannah Fries with Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office.
Janine Kieran-Coker from the League of Women Voters.
Jan Brock with the League of Women Voters and the Women's State Legislative Council.
Jack Ray with the Utah Waterfowl Association.
Tyler Larson, U.S. Forest Service, the Water Rights Program Manager for Intermountain Region 4.
Carla Trenelman, Great Salt Lake Social Scientist.
Wayne Wurtzbaugh, Utah State University.
Eric McCulley, Watershed Scientist.
Melissa Mossberg, USGS.
Christine Ramsey, USGS.
Jeff Denblaker, Jacobs.
David O'Leary, USGS.
Rip Armstrong, Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust.
Allison Barton, the Great Salt Lake Audubon Conservation.
Marissa Weinberg, Great Salt Lake Sentinel Landscape.
Mona Smith, the Utah Inland Port Authority.
Maria Moncur, Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation.
Georgia Corkery, Great Salt Lake Institute, Westminster.
Okay, thanks everybody for doing that. And again, I haven't found an effective way to do it online, but I just note that we've got a lot of council members and liaisons online. I'm looking at Lee Perry, former legislative colleague, Joe Briscoe, served with me in the legislature, Joe Havasi, Compass Minerals, and Tom Ward, also a council member, and others. So thanks for everybody that's participating. I may have mentioned this as a previous meeting, but those of us who have been around here a long time remember when we had council meetings in the small conference room at the county building and fit comfortably. So it's great to have all of you here. And thanks for your participation engagement. Thanks for our AV folks in the back. Really appreciate you, and Angela for all the work that she does behind the scenes to get agendas ready and things like that. So thanks to everybody there. Council members, you've seen the agenda. It was distributed previously. So any discussion of the agenda, or can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, so move from John Cross, second from Leland Myers. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, I'll rule that motion carries. The agenda is approved. You've also got meeting minutes or meeting notes from the May 14th meeting. Any discussion or action on those minutes, those notes from our last meeting? Okay, we have a motion to approve. Can I get a second? Second, Jeff, thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. I'll rule that motion carries unanimously and the minutes are approved. So we're going to move to our first agenda item. We are very fortunate to have with us the fairly newly minted Deputy Commissioner for the Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office. That is Hannah Fries. And we've asked Hannah to just take some time to introduce herself, but also just talk a little bit about, more broadly than that, kind of about her role and perspectives, and just kind of an update from the Commissioner's Office as well. So thanks for being here, Hannah. We'll turn the time over to you.
Thanks for that intro. Tim, I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here with you all. I was just thinking a couple of years ago, probably 3 years ago now, I was newly minted walking into this, one of the first meetings I attended as the Agricultural Water Optimization Program Manager. This was like the first presentation I gave was to this crowd as that program manager. I'd just taken over the program. And so maybe this is, this is fate. This is what I do when I take a new position. And so happy to be here with you all. I'll take a minute to introduce myself and then talk to you about the things that we're doing with the Commissioner's Office. And then kind of looking forward, I'm going to pose some questions to you, so be ready. So quickly, I'll introduce myself. I have spent my entire career working with the Department of Agriculture. I attended Utah State University, got a degree there in animal science, intended to go into dairy nutrition. So you can see how that correlates with being here with Great Salt Lake. Intended to go into dairy nutrition and then had other plans. And so I've been doing conservation work with private landowners, specifically with farmers and ranchers. My whole career, I worked in partnership for several years with the NRCS, doing conservation work there. And then with the Department of Agriculture, I stood up a program called Ag VIP, which was a nutrient management program to help our producers better manage their manure applications and soil testing and tissue testing. And so agriculture is definitely my first and always love. And so I'm happy for the opportunity that Commissioner Steed has given me to bring more of an agricultural perspective to all the important work that you are doing here. I live up in Tremont, Utah. Love Box Elder County. My husband farms about 300 acres up there, also does custom leather work. So we are in it. We are in the grind, and I'm happy to be able to bring that perspective to all of you and hope that it is of value as we all work towards helping the lake. So with that, I will just talk to you a little bit about what we're doing at the Commissioner's Office. And first and foremost, that is our Great Salt Lake Water Delivery Program. So as most all of you know, the Commissioner's Office was awarded $50 million from Bureau of Reclamation. That was through the IRA funding, and that funding has been touch and go. So it was frozen for a minute, and then it was unfrozen. And so that funding is available, and we are rolling out the program next week. And so just to highlight a little bit about what we are looking for and what we're hoping to accomplish with that $50 million, Bureau of Reclamation has allocated 3 buckets, is what we're calling them, of projects that are available for these dollars. And so the first bucket of projects will be voluntary water transactions. And what that looks like for those transactions are, we're looking for large volume, at a minimum of 1,000 acre feet or more of volumes of water that we can temporarily lease to get to Great Salt Lake. And so we're looking for any opportunities to do that. Those would need to be done through an approved change application with the Division of Water Rights and our state engineer. And so we're looking for those kind of like right now, big chunks of water that we would be able to lease to get water to Great Salt Lake. The second bucket of projects that we're looking at is system conservation, and those are our infrastructure projects. And so we're looking for just exactly that. If there are infrastructure projects that we can help fund that may improve efficiency or improve any type of infrastructure system. And then in return, again, for those projects, we are looking at dedications of water to the lake, whether that be a temporary or fixed time or a permanent dedication. We want to be able to look at those opportunities if we can help improve systems and then capture that water savings for the lake. And then our last project bucket that we are looking at is the ecosystem and habitat restoration. This bucket mirrors almost entirely Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust's ecosystem and habitat restoration. Those should feel very similar if you look at those applications and the goals of those projects on there. And so we are just essentially, if we can add money to that pot of all of the amazing work that the trust is doing on ecosystem and habitat restoration. So like I mentioned, applications will be open next week, and they'll be open for a couple months till September 15th. And then we anticipate selecting grant recipients in November. And that information will go live on our website to be able to, if you want to dive deeper into any of these buckets of projects, or if you want to know more, you can visit our website. It's not live yet, so you're going to be disappointed if you look at our website right now, but it will be live come July 15th on there. A couple other things that I'll say just to visit about the project evaluation criteria. So the ecosystem and habitat restoration bucket, like I said, mirrors the trust. And so with those projects will be awarded within 7 miles of the meander line of Great Salt Lake, like the trust does. But the other two buckets are just basin wide. And so that kind of expands the purview that we can look at there. So if project is located within the Great Salt Lake Basin, it is eligible to be considered for funding. And then I'll just share some of the evaluation criteria. Some of them are for multiple project buckets. Some of them are very specific project buckets. But when we look at projects that are within the Great Salt Lake Basin, we're going to give a higher priority to projects that will have a reasonable delivery of water to Great Salt Lake. So if the applicant can describe that delivery there, if the project is sustainable long-term, we're looking at projects, specifically infrastructure projects that are shovel-ready or close to shovel-ready will be given a higher priority, as those funds need to be expended by 2030 or 2031 from BOR. This one of note, this $50 million does not have any match fund requirement. We would like to see match funds. That's always a good show when we can pool our resources together, but it is not required. So if you have projects that may not have matching funds, this is a great place to look. We would like most projects, if applicable, to have a pre-consultation with Division of Water Rights so that we can look at what that change application process might look like in order to deliver water to Great Salt Lake. For voluntary water transactions, we're going to look at, is it a new inflow to the lake or an existing inflow? And the priority date of the water, what that cost per acre foot is, ecosystem and wildlife benefits, and then also kind of the reporting plan that the applicant might have. This is not a comprehensive list. These are just some of the highlights of some of the evaluation criteria that we have. As you explore and go on our website and look, we do have guiding principles that we are using that are available through each RFP that our evaluation committee will be using to determine which projects will get funded and which projects will not get funded. So with that, sorry, that was a lot of information all at once. I'll pause for a second. Are there questions I can answer about our water delivery program?
Any questions of that? We'll go first to the folks at the table. Any questions? Yeah, Brad, go ahead.
Hannah, thanks for that. You kind of touched on it, but going over, like, you have a radius of where the funds can be spent. And so how far is that?
Yeah, thank you. So that's kind of a two-part question. So for the ecosystem and habitat bucket of projects, that radius is within 7 miles of the meander line of Great Salt Lake. For the system conservation, so for infrastructure projects, and then also for voluntary water transactions, those are within Great Salt Lake Basin. So it's not 7 miles. As long as they are located within the basin, those projects will be considered for funding.
And Hannah, presumably the rationale for that is connected wetlands, right? Because
Right.
doing way upstream, it's harder to make the tie.
Right.
But on a transaction, if you can get water almost anywhere in the basin, but could deliver it to Great Salt Lake, that would make sense.
Exactly. Yes, thank you.
So so would Plymouth or Washakie, would that be considered in the Great Salt Lake Basin, even though we're in the Bear River watershed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions from council members or liaisons? Tom? You've got
Thank
one?
you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thanks. Hannah, relative to the funding from the Bureau, can you maybe give an update on where that's at, if it's actually locked in and held by the state with what you have now? Is there a timeline to spend it? And then the bonus question is prospects for future federal funding.
Yeah, thank you. I'll look forward to that bonus question. So yes, the IRA dollars are locked in and available to spend now for the state of Utah. Like I said, there was some uncertainty. We do need to have those spent out by 2031. Sorry, I'm looking at Marcel to remember. 2030, yes. 2030, those funds have to be fully expended. So we've got about 4.5 years to be able to expend those funds. And then future of federal funding, that is one giant question mark. So if I hear anything, I will be sure to share.
Thanks, Tom. Warren, you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Hannah. Good to see you at the new job. Going back to the question about how far this program extends, you mentioned Washakie. Are you actively recruiting water users in the Idaho and Wyoming reaches of the Bear River?
That is a great question. We have defined it as the Great Salt Lake Basin. So I would imagine though the projects that may be outside of a reasonable delivery of water to Great Salt Lake may not score as high as others. But in general, the committee is really focused on being able to kind of welcome all. We would like to see all the projects and all potential opportunities. If at a very minimum, it gives us a chance to see what the interest is out there. And then we can go through and filter which projects we'll be able to fund and hopefully give us the opportunity to show a demand and request more dollars.
Thank you.
Thanks, Warren.
Other questions, comments? Marcel?
Hannah, if you don't mind me just saying so, and maybe you were going to get to it, but also on July 15th, the trust and jointly with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands are also going to open up another funding opportunity on wetlands restoration and protection, and there's $3 million of funding that would be available then. So it's like a big leveraged announcement on Wednesdays or Tuesday, I guess. So we're excited.
Yes, thank you, Marcel. I did fail to mention that. It was just in my mind that, yes, we are piggybacking with all of the momentum that the trust has already built for their wetland enhancement and ecosystem habitat program. And so we are just piggybacking on that momentum to be able to announce our funding at the same time.
Thanks, Marcel. Thanks, Hannah. Any other questions from anybody in the audience or online?
Sorry, I got one.
Yeah, Brad, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Hannah, I got one more.
Thank you.
With Marcella bringing that up, a question that a lot of people may have is on the matching cost share, because it's coming from reclamation to the state. Can you still use federal dollars to cost share, or have you been told that's prohibited?
We have not been told that's prohibited.
Okay.
Yep. So you should be able to. I think we can draw the line that as those dollars transfer to the state, then they'd be considered state dollars.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thanks. Good discussion.
Okay.
Please continue, Hannah.
Thank you. Just a couple more things. Looking forward, just to update you on just some of the right now things that the Commissioner's Office is doing. One thing that we're going to be working on in the upcoming months is a strategic plan check-in. And so what that's going to look like for our office is going through our 1-year goals and then our 1 to 5 year goals and those action items. And we're going to look at what we're doing well, what we need help with, maybe what we need legislative action for, and then what we can be doing better. And that is something that I would like to bring to the committee and this council, and maybe involve you more if it's something that you'd be willing to do as we do that strategic plan check-in. What can we be doing at the commissioner's office for this council? What can we be doing better? What do we need to work on? What improvements do we need to make? And so if that's something the council is open to, we'd love to interact with you more, to have you be more of a guiding force for us as we move forward with that. Pose that question. That sounds okay.
No, and thanks for bringing that up, Hannah. So under the statute, technically Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, one of their roles is to advise the commissioners, consult with the commissioner's office. And so I don't know if anybody has any ideas off the top of your head, but it's more maybe some homework to be thinking about as they consider changes or modifications or whatever to their plan, how the commissioner's office can, suggestions that we might have. So that's something we can take as a council and take seriously to think if we can give some feedback, constructive feedback.
Yeah, we would love that very much. Just a quick update on water leasing. Aspen Johnston is one of our staffers that he is working on some leasing with the Salt Lake and Utah Canal to the tune of about 2,000 acre feet that he was able to lease from that company. And then Micah is our Northern Utah staff member working on leasing. So water leasing is going slower than I think maybe a lot of us would have liked, but I think that we're in a good position to try to stand some things up. We're looking forward to working with some more agricultural producers. I'm definitely looking forward to that as we've been working with Micah. We have some opportunities that we are setting up we've been calling it like a mortgage calculator, and that's something that's easy for our producers to look at to say, these are my inputs on this particular crop. This is what I am getting paid for that crop. We can do some real world numbers there and then adjust that. If I were to choose to lease water this year, what would those numbers look like? And just make that more of an easy transaction if it's something that our producers are interested in doing. And so I'll be happy to come and report more on that as we get that moving and get some more producer outreach going with some water leases. And then the last thing looking forward is the commissioner's office is looking to be more involved in the Great Salt Lake integrated or basin integrated plan. Water Resources has done a wonderful job with that. And that is also another ask that we have of this council, is if that's something that you would like to be more involved in, is if we can bring pieces of that basin integrated plan and receive feedback and guidance. And so Commissioner Steed describes it so we don't get plan fatigue, but it's something that we can all agree is our collective plan that we can all work on and be proud of together. So that's something that we're looking forward to also.
Warren, you've got a question or comment.
Thank you, Tim. Hannah, based on your comments on the Great Basin Integrated Plan, frankly, I've been finding that a little hard to track. I wanted to recommend to our chair maybe that you or someone report, or Laura Vernon, whoever, report each quarter on the progress of that plan. I think it's well for us to keep that front of mind.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Warren, I think it's a great recommendation. I think we need to, and I know I already have an advice from, which is they've got to come up with a better acronym than JIZLBIP.
So the first item of business.
But Warren, that's in order. And I feel the same way. It's easy. That's a, very long and very involved process. And it's really easy to kind of lose track of it. Even for those of us that are quote unquote in the know. So I think that's well advised, and we'll think about, I think maybe just have it be almost a standing item, just an update on that.
All right. Thank you.
Great suggestion. Okay, Hannah, sorry, we keep interrupting you. That's because it's such good stuff.
That was the whole point. And we pretty much have talked about all of these other things for this council looking forward. We talked about maybe being involved more in Basin Integrated Plan. I wanted to pose a question to the council on if you feel like that there would be more agricultural representation, if that would be a benefit to you. Just a question I'd like to pose. It could be a homework question or something to think about. I'd be happy to leverage relationships that I have if that's something we could get a producer on the council, or if you think that things like that would be interested, or I would love to open it up. I'm glad we've been having the discussion already to any other thoughts on what Commissioner's Office can do so that we can better work together and have you really be our guiding council as we move forward.
Thanks, Hannah. Let me just ask that question right now. Does anybody have any thoughts, just that they would, based on reacting to the presentation or just things that they've been thinking about? Lynn, you look like you got something.
Thank you. Thanks, Hannah. This is really exciting. One of the things that one of the questions that continues to be raised when we talk about leveraging, water transactions to come to Great Salt Lake is the verification of how do we know that from point A to point B, it's getting there. And I would presume that you spend a lot of time talking with the state engineer. But that is something that people do wonder about, and maybe in the development of your website and information about successes, you can kind of touch on that so people feel as though there is some sort of clarity of where it's going and how it's getting there.
That's such a great comment, Lynn. I appreciate you bringing that up. It's something that when I talk to our ag producers, that is extremely important to them as well. If they're going to be leasing this invaluable resource to their operations, they want to know that it's making a difference. And so we need to do better at that to be able to say, if you leased us 50 acre feet of water, we want to show you that 50 acre feet made it to the lake, or in a pool, your 50 acre feet is part of this pool. And so that's a wonderful suggestion that we definitely need to do better. Thank you.
Thanks. And Commissioner Perry, you've got a...
Yeah, well, you're talking about the agriculture. I like the idea of bringing maybe some more agriculture representation on the council specific, because I know when they did the tour around the state, one of the things that we brought up here from Boxcar County is a lot of folks don't understand the value of some of these crops and how they can only be grown in certain places. And if you follow that crop for a year, you lose that crop. And so that's one of the things I'm wondering about with your mortgage calculator. Are you not only saying, here's what they make from their crop, but here's what they may lose having to replant and start over? Specifically speaking, like alfalfa, if you let it go for a whole year without watering it, you're going to kill it, and you're going to have to dig it all up and restart over again. It doesn't just pop back, not to mention all the weeds you get in there. So just curious, but I think it's a good idea to have agriculture represented.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Thank you so much for that. I think we definitely need to continue to stress that it's not like flipping a light switch, right? That we can just turn it on and turn it off and grow when we want and not when we don't. And so it's also something that we're working closely with Department of Agriculture to set up a plan. Like the last thing that we want at Commissioner's office is if a farmer releases us water, for that to be dust and weeds, right? So we want to look at, can we plant native grass? Can we plant a cover crop? Can we dry land some alfalfa? Anything like that, so that it's just not a bare field. That's worst case scenario, I think, for all of us.
Yes, I'd just say two reactions to that. One is that there's some interesting examples from Walker Lake. I don't know if Hannah, if you went out and did the Walker Lake tour, but it was a good example of how not to do it, right? With initial strategy being buy and dry and all the problems that resulted from that. And then Lee, just to your point, I think we tend to demonize alfalfa. Alfalfa actually is flexible in a way other crops aren't, that sort of allow for some of these innovative water sharing things. Heidi, and then we'll go to Warren.
Thank you. I just would like to, say that, yes, I think there is a need for the representation on the council, and make the point that ag lands are so important for connectivity, water connectivity to the lake. And, once we lose more and more agricultural land to hardscaped surfaces, where is that water going? It's not going to the lake.
Yes, absolutely. I know where the alfalfa, or where the water is in my alfalfa field, where the ibis are, right? You know where the water is in the field because the ibis are in the field. And so it's just vital for so many systems to keep some open lands as well.
Okay, let's go to Warren, and then we'll go to Leland. Warren, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for coming back to me, Tim. I did want to mention that ostensibly I'm the agricultural liaison on this council. So, Hannah, if that's helpful, please let me know. But I think it would be helpful to have agricultural representation from a producer whose farming operation is within the Great Salt Lake Basin. I think that's essential. And back to alfalfa, yes, we found in this country, at least, I'm in central Utah, we can fallow it for a year and it comes back, but some nasty things happen in the meantime, like weeds and such. But we do. The commissioner's point's a good one. You have to look at the, all effects of some of these strategies that are discussed, because it's not just a simple, often not a simple, straightforward answer. But Hannah, you're welcome to call me anytime if we want to try to set something up with more agricultural involvement within the basin.
Yes, thank you, Warren. I appreciate that.
Leland, go ahead.
2 points. One, I think that the council probably should be involved deeply in the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan. I think that's a good idea. Oftentimes, the council is sort of over here and agencies are over here.
Yes.
And I think that needs to be, there needs to be a greater degree of continuity between the two on these issues. And I think being involved in the integrated plan would be good. In fact, having some people from the council represented on the planning commission group would be probably beneficial. Secondly, I think that in order to resolve the water issues that the Great Salt Lake needs to have resolved, we need conservation hand in glove between agriculture and municipal. I think that that's a challenge, not because it can't be done, but because oftentimes, I have neighbors that say, I'm not going to save water on my lawn until I know that the farmers who use most of the water are giving up a lot of water too. And, or the other comment is, well, you can't do anything with M&I water. It's just not enough. And that's not true, nor is it true that the farmers are not trying. But I think having a direct representative on the council would be beneficial from the agricultural community. We have council members who have connections to agriculture, but having someone who sits at the table saying, I am agriculture would be beneficial.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was so interesting as I've been here just about a month in this position. Like I said, spent my whole career in agriculture. And even being involved with all of the agency work, I had no idea what municipal and industrial is doing. I had no idea what the mineral companies are doing. And so I think that's a real opportunity, because we see a lot of finger pointing, right? That ag is like, not till the golf courses are dry, and municipal industrial is like, not till that wheel line is shut off. And so if we could just bring them together, I think it'd be so cool to be able to show ag, this is what Compass Minerals did. Here's an example of what they did to, get some points on the board. Here's what municipal and industrial are doing. If we could just share some of that information, would be valuable, so we can recognize what everybody is doing better.
Thanks, Hannah. We'll talk about it in just a minute, but one of the things this council's prioritized is telling some of the positive success stories so far, the projects that have been most effective. And so we want to highlight something from agriculture. We want to highlight something from the M&I space, or from the mineral companies, and tribes, to try to just really sort of tell those positive stories so people feel like there's positive momentum and that they all have a role to play. Joe, I see where your ears are buzzing. So
yeah, I appreciate that, Hannah. And it's noteworthy. June 15th is an important date in the voluntary agreement that Compass Minerals signed to. And what happens on June 15th is the elevation of the south arm is benchmarked, and that dictates what your consumption can be the following year. So that's probably the biggest part of the agreement. And with the lake elevation of 4193, that was we have 50% of our water right that can be consumed, and actually we're going to be much less than that. But it's an important date, and I think it's noteworthy. And just wanted to bring that to light here.
great context, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Other questions or comments? Yeah, Darren, go ahead.
Just in concert with Leland's comment, as we've worked with producers and farmers, and we've talked about fallowing lands, as public water suppliers, we get the same comment from producers to say, until every lawn around my farm is yellow or brown, I am not going to impact my family or my livelihood, where it's already difficult for me to make a dollar, on my farm. But until I see the municipal folks chipping in as well, where I'm producing a commodity, something for, the public, what are those green lawns doing, around my farm? I realize maybe it's helping with heat island effect, that kind of thing. But I really need to see more involvement from the community around me before I'm going to go ahead and participate and fallow any land. And so, like Leland said, it's really hand in glove. Both ag and M&I need to work together. We need to be on the same page, and it's going to take a Herculean effort, right, from all the folks around the table. And so, but I agree with, an ag producer on council would be great.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Lynn, take it away.
Thank you. And one of the things that I think people may or may not realize is timing of, say, ag optimization measures. And when I think back to, what was it, 2019, when 200 million was, appropriated for that measure. And Trevor has made this point many times, that it takes time to incorporate these infrastructural changes. So maybe on the website as well, there can be a way to help people understand what has been accomplished with funding that has needed to be matched or doesn't need to be matched.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think ag optimization gets a lot of criticism because it was kind of assumed to be like that light switch, right? Like we did it, switch the light, water's in the lake. And I think if we can help people understand that these ag optimization projects are that first step, that we can then be more efficient with our irrigation water to then allow us to take the next step and look at leasing. And so it was just the first step. And yes, it takes time. It's not always as fast as people expect it to be. So thank you.
Warren, you've got a comment.
Senate Bill 277 that appropriated the $200 million was passed in 2023.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Lynn's point is a good one. It takes time to change things when your clock basically ticks once a year on agricultural production. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leland.
Just one last comment. 100 years ago, when we first set up the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, Lynn can remember that. The one thing we discovered as we reviewed management of the Great Salt Lake, and I think we're starting to fix this problem, but I don't think we're there yet. Commissioner's office has got to be the one who makes this happen. And that's that these agencies do work in very much silos. And bringing that together and producing a cohesive plan is difficult across agencies. And so hopefully that can be done to bridge between the municipal, the industrial, and the agriculture through the commissioner's office. So I'm in favor of it, but I think it's going to take a lot of strong work on the part of the commissioner's office to bridge all of these institutional barriers that keep people working in their silos rather than working together. And I see that when we do work on Utah Lake also, that there's no institutional cohesiveness about how to recover Utah Lake. Same thing goes for Great Salt Lake. We don't see the groups really working together as much as they should be.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Yes, comment here.
Isn't there a point of no return? I mean, aren't we getting close to, when you talk about it's slow, change is slow, but when is it too late?
Well, Hannah, you want to handle that hot potato, or should I?
Pass.
I mean, it's interesting to think about it. Like, there are certainly critical thresholds. So you tip over a certain threshold. For example, salinity is a good example. If you hit the wrong salinity in Gilbert Bay, your ecosystem will collapse. That doesn't mean it won't come back if conditions return, but you've sort of damaged it for a significant period of time. And it's important to realize that some of those thresholds you trip long before you still have a lake, but you're tripping through those thresholds. I think the good news is it's a very resilient system. Like, the things that live out there are inherently flexible, but they also have to have water, right? They have to have some breathing room. So yeah, there's certainly urgency. And I think one of the things that all of us that work in Great Salt Lake feel is the urgency, the imperative to act, and to act quickly, but also act in a way that's constructive and that builds really lasting solutions rather than grabbing at straws where we inadvertently create problems that then we have to resolve. So the one thing we don't want to do is to move back. So we're trying to move a very big ship. And I don't know if you add anything to that. But.
No, I think that that's great. Yeah, I think we feel the pressure, right, of that time is of the essence, and you're doing what we can. And sometimes it feels like that's not enough, but we are doing what we can, and we're trying, and I think that effort should be recognized. And we keep working together.
So Joe, you've got something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, Tim, and I appreciate the question, but it's also noteworthy. You know, every salinity advisory committee meeting is riveting for a scientist, because we've kind of entered into a new paradigm of salinity and lake elevation in the South Arm with the construction of the berm. And not that that's you know, the solution or the relief. It's just it's a change in the system since 2022, and it's noteworthy and really interesting that the South Arm has freshened a bit more than it would have without the berm.
Yeah, it's a great comment, Joe, and I think it's important. A lot of people don't realize that. So, yes, restoring lake elevations is extraordinarily hard. Where the state has made, I think, dramatic progress is in managing salinity, and what that's built for us is what I would call a salinity buffer, where we could have several very dry years and still have a functioning ecosystem on account of that. And so the state is making progress. Some of that's, you know, big ticket items, and some of that's more behind the scenes. But slowly but surely, we're building the tools, the levers that we can pull in times of emergency to move things in the right direction. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I have a two-part question. One is, it's interesting that Joe said it's scientifically riveting for those. And, you know, the people in this room are obviously interested in this, but maybe this is rhetorical, but how do we get all those, you know, just regular run-of-the-mill people across the whole state or across the whole basin engaged in this? You know, what is that? What makes them want to do that to their lawn or their life or whatever? Because I don't think, if it doesn't cost more and if the water keeps coming on when they turn it on, I don't think they're really interested unless, you know, they're like people in this room. And then I also had a question about groundwater use and where we are on capturing the groundwater use. But really the education of people across the basin is, how are we going to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that it's something that we continue to work on here as a group, and take opportunities to get out in front of the public as often as we can, invite the public to things, or, you know, even like Lynn mentioned, if there's things on websites that can be quickly referenced. In terms of groundwater, there are experts in this room that know way more about that than me. And so I know the commissioner's office is involved in some work with Utah State on studying the groundwater and getting a better feel for groundwater around Great Salt Lake. But that's all that I know at this point. Does anybody else want to add?
Yeah, I don't have much to add on groundwater. I will say on that public outreach, that is kind of a question, because the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, we release reports that are outward facing. The commissioner's office has stuff that they're doing that's outward facing. But you know, there's a lot more that could be done. I think there's some thoughts and efforts in terms of, you know, how we can educate the public or help engage the public or lower barriers. If somebody wants to flip their strip, for example, what resources are available to them. So there's a lot going on there, but it's interesting. I don't know if, as folks were driving out here, if you passed the little tennis facility that was just up the road. It's they just barely built a brand new tennis facility. Their landscape is entirely xeriscape with just a couple of things on drip. The owners don't come to advisory council meetings. So, but something has clicked for them. And I constantly see that, and I ask myself that question. I don't know that we know the answer, but why does that individual homeowner make that decision to flip their strip or to convert to drip or to xeriscaping? Why did that business go full xeriscaping? We have a Chuckarama in Bountiful. It's 100% xeriscape. Maybe Darren knows. Maybe he's yeah. Are you a frequenter of? No, I'm just kidding.
I do not frequent Chuckarama. No, I do not. I just wanted to comment on the groundwater. Obviously, you know, as everybody knows, there has been significant declines in groundwater levels over the last 50 years. You know, we've seen upwards, and we have 22 deep groundwater wells. We augment our supplies with those wells, particularly in, you know, dry conditions when we don't have much surface water, like in 2022. We pumped our groundwater wells significantly. And as a result, that impacts, right, the groundwater. But if we don't have the surface water to deliver, then we do pull it out of the ground. But when we have surface water, then we really take it easy on our groundwater wells. It's difficult to continue to have groundwater wells work effectively. Things are always breaking when you're pulling water out of the ground like that. It's terribly expensive, and it takes a lot of mechanical devices in order to make that happen. And mechanical devices inherently fail. And so it's very difficult to continue to operate that equipment. But what we have seen is, you know, like along the Weber River, you know, we have wells, you know, along that South Weber, Uinta, Riverdale. I mean, those wells, we have not seen any significant drop in over the last 50 years, you know, when they're close to the source of water. But the further you migrate away from those river systems, then you see, you know, the degradation. And we have had to drop pumps in a variety, in several of our wells, as a result of groundwater declines over the years. And so as you get closer to the lake, obviously Woods Cross has had huge subsidence issues, right, there in Woods Cross. And we know that's from overpumping of the groundwater. And so, I mean, the groundwater is another significant issue, but it's really a balance, right, between surface and groundwater. And we really need to lay off the groundwater sources when we have plenty of surface water that we can deliver to let those rest and to let those recharge. And I know some cities do not have, you know, the opportunities to do that because they rely on those heavily. So they pump their groundwater wells significantly, even in, you know, a wet season, because they just don't have that option. So it depends on the municipality and the issues that they have. But yeah, groundwater declines are an issue, and we're concerned about it.
Thanks, Darren. I think we had a really hard question coming in from this guy, Brian Steed. I'm not sure who that is, but anyway, Brian, proceed with your question, for your difficult question for Hannah.
So Hannah, why are you so awesome? No, that's not the question. So the real, I'm just answering on the groundwater question. The commissioner's office has financed some studies looking at the groundwater exchange between Great Salt Lake, and I will say that the emerging science from Utah Geologic Survey as well as from the University of Utah is twofold. One, that there is more exchange between groundwater and the Great Salt Lake than we had previously known. So there's more, groundwater is more important to Great Salt Lake than we had heretofore considered. And then secondly, there is more shallow groundwater in Great Salt Lake than we had known about as well. And that's something I think that we're going to have to evaluate. There's a new study from the University of Utah that I haven't fully digested yet, that is showing a bunch of seeps and springs in the middle of the Great Salt Lake, in the like at Farmington Bay and some of the dried areas. That makes some really interesting questions about how to best use that resource and how to be aware of that exchange. So it's still emerging, but we are doing the research to find out what that means.
Thanks, Brian. And thanks, Hannah. We've kept you up there a long time. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the input and look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thanks so much. Now, let me just editorialize for a minute, but I think the lake sort of writ large is super lucky to have Hannah on board. There are a few people in the state that know more about ag programs and work more closely with ag. And so we're very lucky to have you, Hannah, and welcome aboard in this new role. Brian, you've got a comment.
I was just going to echo how grateful I am that Hannah said yes. And Hannah has been really, really, really instrumental to working with communities that we have not been super effective in reaching out to. And she's wicked smart, and the state's really lucky to have her as a public servant. So thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, well, we deliberately kept the agenda a little bit light today, and we might get out early. But it's been really good. We've had a really good, robust discussion, and sometimes when we have cramped agendas, we don't have the time to do that. So I appreciate the opportunity to sort of sit and reflect on this. And thanks, Hannah, for running through that presentation. Our next guest is Mona Smith, who's the Environmental and Sustainability Director for the Utah Inland Port Authority. And Mona, we really appreciate you being here and taking some time to present to us as well. So we'll turn the time over to you. I think we're just getting up your presentation, and we'll have time for questions on this presentation as well. Take it away, Mona. Thanks again for being here. So
Let me push the button. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to see if I can get this.
You're going to have to almost eat that mic when you get ready, but you're just trying to run the slideshow, right?
Yeah.
From the...
I tried pressing the slideshow button, but it didn't seem to translate. Huh.
Should be that slideshow button at the top.
Well, let me try.
We've got the AV guy coming in to rescue.
Yeah, so do. Thank you for your patience. Appreciate it. It's not going to work.
And then go ahead and...
There we go. There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Mona Smith. I'm the Environmental and Sustainability Director at the Utah Inland Port Authority. I'm really excited to be here with you today to share some of our prominent environmental mitigation efforts that I believe are contributing to significant positive changes for the Great Salt Lake. Just to give you a little background, I've been with the port for about 3.5 years now. I came to the port with a background in environmental restoration and remediation projects, primarily for federal clients, a lot of cleanup work for military clients. I also supported remediation work for Superfund sites across the Midwestern US. So really happy to bring my expertise to the port and to share about some of the great work that we're doing. I want to focus on 3 of our initiatives that I think have the ability to really bring positive impacts for our Great Salt Lake. We have approved and recently updated a wetlands policy that designates tax differential towards wetland mitigation projects. We also have developed a coordinated strategy to protect wetlands in our West Weber project area. And we were able to secure a grant award from the EPA through their Clean Ports program. I realize there has been a lot of uncertainty with the new administration on federal funding, but we actually just received written assurance from our EPA project officer this morning that our funds are obligated and will not be impacted by any of the new One Big Beautiful Bill Act or any of the prior temporary federal funding freezes. I wanted to start with our wetlands policy, and I wanted to recognize all of the support, the expertise, the guidance that was shared from many subject matter experts, qualified, passionate professionals. We have been able to define wetlands in our policy in a way that I think is comprehensive of all of the important, precious aquatic resources that are unique to the Great Salt Lake Basin and to our state of Utah. So in our policy, we've defined wetlands as areas that are inundated or saturated by surface or groundwater. Oh, pardon my typo here. By surface or groundwater at a frequency and duration sufficient to support, and that under normal circumstances do support a prevalence of vegetation typically adapted for life in saturated soil conditions, or in the case of playas, hydrologic solid indicators such as cracked soil and salt crusts. In the Intermountain West, wetlands typically consist of fresh and saltwater marsh, wet meadows, playas, and mudflats. We've expanded this definition of wetlands beyond how wetlands are federally defined to make sure that we're capturing all of the unique aquatic resources in the state of Utah and around the Great Salt Lake. I think with this definition, it's clear that wetlands are not always wet, and we need to be considerate of important areas such as playas that don't always have water in them. Now, as per this policy, landowners within our project areas that have wetlands present on their properties are eligible for UIPA incentives if projects on their properties avoid impacting the wetlands, if they enhance or restore existing wetlands on or near their properties, if they establish new wetlands, or if they permanently preserve existing wetlands on or near their properties. Additionally, upon approval of our board, we are able to designate tax differential funds towards wetland mitigation projects. And it is required by our policy that these wetland mitigation projects go above and beyond what is required by federal and state wetland regulations. This means that this funding cannot be used for regulatory permitting processes, delineation efforts that would be required of landowners prior to implementing projects on their properties. Examples of some of the projects that this wetland mitigation funding can be used for include water purchases, land easements that create natural buffer zones between development areas and natural areas, wetland characterization efforts, but again, above and beyond what is required by federal and state wetland regulations, as well as wetland mitigation projects that follow methods identified by the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm happy to pause there for a question if.
Sure. Any, thanks, Mona. Any questions? We'll start with council members liaison. Any questions for Mona based on what she's presented so far? How about anybody in the audience? Yes, please. We'll get you with the mic there. Thanks.
So this language doesn't anywhere say shall. It seems like you're just offering carrots. Am I correct about that? Like, is there a requirement that these wetlands under this biological wetland definition are going to be protected? Or is that an optional thing for developers? And if they choose to protect them, then they might get some of these little bonuses that you're offering?
That's a great question. Thank you, Dita. So per our policy, we do require, I believe we use the word shall, we require that project areas that contain wetlands that fall within the Great Salt Lake or the Utah Lake watershed, there is a percentage of the tax differential that must go towards wetland mitigation projects within or with a nexus to that project area. And you'll see in the strategy that we've created for our West Weber project area specifically, we not only have our wetlands policy in play there, but we are also requiring that landowners conduct a current delineation study, have that submitted to the Army Corps prior to us working with them, offering them any financial tools, incentives, and prior to them being eligible to submitting their projects for wetland mitigation funding through the policy.
You're going with the Army Corps' very narrow definition of wetlands. We all know what that looks like now. Am I right?
So what wetlands are characterized within those delineation studies, that is not what is defining wetlands within our policy. For properties that contain wetlands that meet our definition within the policy, those property owners are eligible to submit their wetland mitigation projects for the wetland mitigation funding that will be made available through the policy. Does that answer your question?
Thanks. No, oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm concerned about there's 77% wetlands that are at risk from our choice as a state to develop, to fast track and incentivize inland port development. And what we're hearing is that there is recognition that that's a problem. But what I'm concerned about is that we're going to be relying in the end on Army Corps definitions. And what you're going to see is that we're going to lose a lot of the remaining wetlands in the Great Salt Lake Basin to this fast track incentivized development. That's the issue.
Okay. Mona, we'll let you respond to that if you'd like, and then we'll just have you continue with your presentation. So thanks for your questions, Dita, and thanks, Mona.
Great, thank you so much. Again, I'd just like to reiterate that we have defined wetlands in our policy to be comprehensive of wetlands that do not fit the federal definition that the Army Corps uses in their delineation studies. I think because of that, it allows us the opportunity to provide funding for wetland mitigation projects that normally may not meet qualification or eligibility criteria, especially through federally funded programs. I think this is a tool that can allow us to support wetland mitigation in the state of Utah beyond options that are currently available through federal assistance. So I appreciate the questions. I just want to clarify the reason we have expanded our definition in our policy is so that we could get this funding out there to all of the wetlands in the state of Utah around the Great Salt Lake that could use funding for mitigation efforts.
Thanks, Mona.
Of course, thank you. I will continue by sharing some of the prioritization criteria we've outlined in our wetlands policy for projects that should be prioritized. We would like to uplift projects that mitigate wetlands that are part of larger wetland complexes, projects that mitigate wetlands that have a designated beneficial use category, projects that partner with the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust, projects that are located adjacent to or within 600 feet of wildlife or waterfowl management areas or national refuges. We'd also like to prioritize projects that create natural, ecologically meaningful buffer zones between wetland complexes and development areas. In our policy, we state that actions that leave only isolated small wetlands surrounded by development are going to be disfavored. And as part of our policy, we've committed to coordinating all wetland mitigation expenditures with the Department of Natural Resources and the Great Salt Lake Commissioner. That I'm happy to pause and take any more questions on our wetlands policy. There is a link to our policy included in this presentation, which I'm happy to share out with the group after this meeting.
Mona, do you still have more slides after this one, or is that?
I do. I have two other topics I'd like to cover.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and just cover that, and then we'll do kind of questions on the whole thing right at the end.
Overall questions. Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Wonderful. Then I will move on to our West Weber wetland strategy, which is a specific coordinated strategy for the protection and preservation of wetlands in our West Weber project area. I'll start by sharing that per our statute, and this is verbatim from the statute, inland port funds cannot be spent on developer costs as defined by the local legislative body associated with the development and construction of public infrastructure and improvements in an affected project area. And in our West Weber wetland strategy, which has been adopted as part of the project area plan for West Weber, links are included on this slide, we have committed that the port will not support development or construction that would result in the destruction of wetlands. To do this, as a first requirement, we are coordinating with landowners in the project area to ensure that they have an updated wetland delineation study completed along with a phase 1 environmental site assessment. And we're requiring this on properties where we have identified historically characterized wetlands per the National Wetlands Inventory. This National Wetlands Inventory is based off of the federal definition of a wetland. I realize it is not comprehensive of all wetland types here in Utah, but it is a good starting point for us to require an updated wetland delineation study. In cases where there are historically characterized wetlands, the port has committed to only working with landowners that have delineated those wetlands in accordance with the Army Corps to ensure that we, at a minimum, protect the wetlands that have been delineated in accordance with the Army Corps. Per this strategy, again, the port commits that no Inland Port Authority resources will be made available to develop lands with historically characterized wetlands until an updated wetlands delineation study conducted within the past 5 years has been completed, in addition to a phase 1 ESA. And I'll clarify here that when I say develop lands, I'm not talking about developing over the wetlands. I'm talking about any development occurring on a single landowner's property that has wetlands located on the property. I just want to make that clarification. Second,
Hey, Mona, I know I said we were going to save questions to the end, but we've got Soren Simonson, who's got a question, so we may stop you just briefly to have you answer that question. Soren, go ahead.
Tim, I'll wait to the end of the presentation. I just wanted to raise a hand to follow up when Mona's done.
Perfect. Okay. Why don't you continue and we'll come back to Soren when we get to the end.
Wonderful, can do. Secondly, as part of this strategy, if an updated characterization determines that existing wetlands are present on a property, then the port will not allow for any expenditure from any part of the project area plan and budget that would benefit the landowner that has those existing wetlands until there is an agreement in place between the port and the respective landowner, which will ensure the protection of the wetlands. The port will actively and is actively working with landowners, Weber County, the state of Utah, to create additional conservation easements that provide protection to existing wetlands, as well as setback areas to create buffer zones around the wetlands and ecologically sensitive areas. We've been working with DNR on various efforts to own and manage land for the preservation and perpetuity of critical wetlands around the Great Salt Lake shoreline. But that is a separate, not separate from what we're doing in West Weber, but that ties in here as well. Also, as part of the West Weber wetland strategy, we require that areas within our Weber County project area that border the waterfowl management areas, there's Harold Crane to the north, there's Ogden Bay to the south. We require that they shall have a minimum of a 600-foot buffer between their development areas and the wildlife management areas. Until those buffer zones have been defined within the agreement that we make with the property owner, tax differential and other port financial tools such as authority infrastructure bank loans will not be provided by the port to the respective landowners and tenants occupying land that border these waterfowl management areas. And with that, that is the end of my West Weber wetland strategy presentation. I have one more thing I'd like to share with the group.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to take some time to talk about and celebrate our EPA Clean Ports Program Award. We have been working very closely with the Division of Air Quality for some time now. I will say, I think this really goes back to Senate Bill 136 that required the diesel emissions reduction framework study from DAQ. And the recommendations that came out of the study seem to align perfectly with the tasks that the EPA is looking to complete in the Clean Ports program. On February of last year, they announced about $3 billion in funding through the IRA to fund zero-emission port equipment and infrastructure, as well as climate and air quality planning projects at U.S. ports. In partnership with Division of Air Quality, we successfully submitted 2 applications on behalf of the state and were awarded just over $112 million in total. Partners on the project, in addition to Division of Air Quality and the Port Authority, include Union Pacific and Pacificor, as well as the fleet owners and operators servicing the Salt Lake City Intermodal Terminal, which is the rail terminal owned by Union Pacific that's near I-80 on the west side of Salt Lake. Our portion of the grant, we have $2.4 million to complete climate and air quality planning activities, which include the development of a baseline emissions inventory for vehicles and equipment operating at the Salt Lake City Intermodal Terminal. Part of that will be to assess diesel emission reduction strategies. We are also going to launch a formal process to engage with near-port communities and other stakeholders on the project, as well as on general feedback and concerns regarding air quality on the west side of Salt Lake. We have funding to complete a zero-emission workforce impact assessment. I'm really excited that this project looks at the entire life cycle of what it would take to transition a facility to a zero emissions, including assessing impacts to workforce. And as part of this project, we will be publishing public-facing documents that detail all of our findings from these planning activities. Now, in parallel, DAQ will be, DAQ will be implementing their program simultaneously. This is a voluntary program where they're providing incentives that would cover up to 75% of the cost of a new piece of equipment or up to 90% of the cost of a new piece of zero emission equipment if an equivalent diesel vehicle or piece of equipment is scrapped. We're estimating around, with the funding that we've received, we're estimating around purchase or incentive up to about 75 pieces of charging equipment, about 60 Class 8 trucks, 60 Class 5 through 7 trucks. We have funding for one zero-emission switcher locomotive, funding for a solar microgrid system to produce on-site power. And then we're looking at about 22 pieces of cargo handling equipment, terminal tractors, forklifts, reach stackers.
Mona, is this that 110 million?
Yes. So yes, pardon, I should have specified. DAQ has been awarded the 110 million to complete this work. This is a rough estimate of what they have projected in terms of budget. So these numbers may or may not look like this, and it really is depending on participation as the program is voluntary. So they'll also be completing community engagement activities, safety planning, feasibility planning. So we're really excited to be moving forward despite some of the delays and uncertainties. At the port, we've actually just hired 2 full-time staff to implement both the baseline emissions inventory and to do the community engagement efforts as well. So I believe that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mona. I really appreciate that. I'm going to go, as we normally do, to council members and liaisons first, and then we'll pick up Soren. But anybody, council members or liaisons, have any questions or comments for Mona? Appreciate that thorough presentation. Soren, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you great.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry I can't be with you in person. I'm just headed into a meeting at Salt Lake County in a few minutes, and so I'm just joining virtually today. Mona, thank you so much for the presentation. I know we've had a chance to meet a couple of times in my capacity with the Jordan River Commission and Watershed Council, and it's great to see so much work happening around your wetland programs. We know that's really important. I just want to kind of raise, and you can respond to it, maybe for some council, Great Salt Lake Advisory Council consideration. You know, there is a lot of focus on wetlands. They are often protected through federal and state programs. They're only a part of the habitat that is critical for wildlife, and we've been working on some initiatives around the Jordan River that focus on riparian restoration and conservation, but also looking at connected uplands. And I know that that is also really important and really essential for the work that's happening around habitat preservation and conservation around Great Salt Lake as well, given the significance of productive areas, which include a lot of wetlands and impounded areas, but also significant habitat is connected in low-lying uplands that are outside of the floodplain, which are often seen as developable areas, except that they, you know, are sometimes productive agricultural land and sometimes really important and necessary habitat. And so I would be curious to see how we can expand the focus not just on wetlands as habitat, but also contiguous uplands. I've been involved with a working group, and Heidi and Lynn are also connected with this working group. And I think it'd be really valuable to think about kind of that spectrum of habitat areas that include uplands that are closely proximate to and often really important and valuable in connection with the wetlands that are being considered for preservation and conservation.
Thanks, Soren. Why don't you get that really question about the connected habitats, really?
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, Soren. I think uplands are often left out of the conversation because they're the heroes behind the scenes doing a lot of work to make sure that the water gets downstream to the wetlands and eventually to the lake. I am currently working on, and I have a pretty lofty goal of expanding our wetlands policy to be comprehensive of all natural resources. And that includes wildlife habitat, cultural and archaeological resources. And so that's something that I have in the works, but we'll need to vet through our team and receive approval of eventually from our board. But as I am in the process of doing that, I have really appreciated everyone who has already provided me feedback to strengthen and enhance our wetlands policy, and would love to reach out for further guidance and information that can help us really strengthen our policy to be conducive and complementary of all the different pieces of the puzzle that contribute to a healthy watershed and a healthy ecosystem. So would definitely love future feedback as I go through that process.
Okay, thanks. Mona, I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, looks like no. Thank you so much, Mona. I really appreciate the effort that went into your presentation. Thanks for the work you're doing, and good to have you here today.
Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda, we're going to turn to Angela is going to give us a little bit of an update, just to remind sort of the audience and council members, we've tried to front load. We have a little bit of money each year that we give out, about $125,000. And one of the things we've wanted to do is to make sure that money gets spent in advance, like gets obligated early enough in the cycle that it can do all the work we want it to do. And so Angela's going to give us just a little bit of an update. We've got a working group that's been working through potential project ideas and making recommendations. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, Angela.
Okay, great. I'll just stay sitting here because this is short. A lot of you have seen this before. We're thinking about how to effectively spend our funding for fiscal year 2026, which is we're in it. So we have, great. As a reminder, we have $125,000 to spend between July 1st, so the beginning of this month, all the way through the end of June of next year. And to accomplish GSLAC's purposes, so to inform what people are talking about, policymakers, the broader Great Salt Lake community and the public, and what people understand, know, and care about when they're talking about the lake. So we had this aspirational timeline. We're close, but didn't quite hit it. Where we are, we've taken the scopes of work for the projects that we identified and approved last time in May, and right now 2 of them are out for RFP. So last time the council approved putting out an RFP to update the 2019 report that GSLAC had funded 6 years ago, looking at the consequences of drying lakes around the world. So it takes saline lakes in a bunch of different contexts, gives some background and context for each lake, and draws some parallels with Great Salt Lake. And so we thought that would be a valuable, broad context for what's happening to the lake now. So that's out for RFP right now, or it is in the works to be out for RFP. That's in the state machinery right now. And then the other one that's also in the same spot is looking at win-win solutions. We decided actually not to make them quite case studies, since that has a sort of specific academic meaning. So I didn't update this title, but we're make a very PR-friendly, public-friendly set of short videos, and then an easy-to-read document where people can see successes that we've had. So we've talked about some possible stories to include there, so that people can see what's happening, and it's really easy to share, easy to engage with. So those 2 are in green because those are on their way to be out for request for proposals. The one in sort of that orangey burnt umber color, we put this one on the back burner for a little while. We have a little bit more homework to do on this one, to ask about what's already existing for repositories / clearinghouses / hosting of the Great Salt Lake website. What's the scope that we really want, and what are other folks doing? So we backburnered that for a little while. And then the one in black is still a sort of question mark. We thought about trying to bring people who are researching groundwater together. We know that it's still, as Commissioner Steed talked about, it's an emerging field of study, but bringing the folks together in the same room so that people can share what they know at this point, and move forward from there. As a summary, I wanted to share a little bit about 2 projects that we funded in fiscal year 25 that just wrapped up, that were really exciting. So one was we contracted with SWCA to coordinate with all those folks across the top. So you can see Utah Waterways, folks in DNR, the Commissioner's Office, others, to take a bunch of different toolboxes that have been developed for M&I water conservation, centralize them into a easily digestible presentation, and then share it with municipalities. So they had several meetings with these to hone a united message, create about an 18-minute video that's on YouTube and also on the GSLAC website now, and then meet with city councils or city water managers to share these and help folks move forward on things that they might need more support on. So these are on the GSAC website. This is the list of contacts, and you can also go see their video. The other thing that just got wrapped up at the end of June was an update to another 2019 study that GSAC had funded about the economic costs of declining water levels in Great Salt Lake. So here's just a graphic where they look at different costs in a bunch of different aspects of what might happen as water levels fall. Where would that impact people, wildlife, the ecosystem? And so sort of the headline is we've been, a lot of people have been quoting the number from the 2019 study. It's really exciting to have had such good traction with that study. Here are their updated figures. So they put a range of $2.1 to $2.8 billion a year if the lake fell to like much lower than it is now. And then they gave us a 20-year projection, although hard to project that far, but those are big numbers. So this one will be up on the GSAC website, but isn't yet. But they have executive summary, they have a full report with a lot of detail, and then they also have a PowerPoint presentation that's downloadable and shareable if folks would like to share it with others. That's that. Any questions about those?
Any question or comments on either the projects that have been funded, and thanks for that report, Angela, or the ones that we're talking about doing? I mean, I might just mention, Hannah, I think that Great Salt Lake, that Utah.gov is just rolling out. But, one of the questions we have is like right now, Great Salt Lake Advisory Council has these reports, which have been really important. They're buried on page, whatever. So they're buried pretty far down. So I think the question for the council has just been, where is it best to be hosted? And maybe that it can be co-hosted on Great Salt Lake Utah.gov or whatever. We're just trying to understand the lay of the land and obviously drive traffic to the most relevant information for the public.
Angela, would it be possible to have you share that's a great presentation, share it by email for people who would like it?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll send it out to the council and the list.
Great, thank you.
Warren, you've got a comment, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I know that Matt Yost and Burdette Barker at Utah State University are working on a proposal for a repository / clearinghouse / hosting of water information that would include GSL. It might be well to coordinate with them. I think they have some funding already for the project they're trying to stand up, and it looks like it would be very closely related to the one that you're trying to gather information on. So I'd suggest those contacts if that's helpful to you.
That's a good suggestion, Warren. And maybe all this stuff doesn't go on one website, but at a minimum, some cross tabbing, some cross referencing so people can, from the one site jump to the other. So I think we need to give some thought to that. Great suggestion. Lynn, go ahead.
Perhaps at the 2026 Great Salt Lake Issues Forum, we could actually have that component of the groundwater forum to be part of that program, part of the program. But just a thought.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. Any other thoughts or comments on projects? Again, we're well ahead of where we normally are because we've kind of prioritized this stuff. I will say on that SWCA, because of the way the funding works, it's sort of, stroke of midnight. Everybody turns to pumpkins. So they could continue that work. And one of the things that the council can consider if we want to fund them to kind of continue some of that additional work. I think they were trying to schedule some additional things with municipalities. They've also learned a few things. So I think they have some recommendations in terms of different ways to approach it. But we could do, out of our funding for this next cycle, we could do a follow-up in that M&I space if the council thinks it makes sense. So welcome comments on that. Okay, any other questions or comments on projects? Okay, if not, thanks so much for that. It is our tradition to have public comment, to sort of open mic for just a minute. We're at about time. We normally end close to 11:30, but it's not a hard stop. So I do want to open it momentarily for public comment. So we have Dita wants to make a public comment, and then anybody else, you're more than welcome to. So go ahead.
So I just want to go back to the inland port for a minute. So groundwater issues with regard to the inland port developments are really important. In the Tooele Valley, there are two really big inland port projects. And again, this is a choice we're making as a state to fast track and incentivize this development. And the groundwater issues in the Tooele Valley we're finding are really significant. They may be over allocated. And so I submit to you that it's worthwhile to investigate what the hydrology of these areas is. And we don't have good information about Tooele County, that portion that abuts the Great Salt Lake. The other area that is now under assault from inland port development is the Eagle Mountain Cedar Fort Fairfield area, and that is also a closed basin. They are dependent on groundwater. There was a study done in 2007 that shows that drawdown could be happening, and this is just from the development in Eagle Mountain, to the extent of 100 feet. I'm not a hydrologist, but that sounds like a lot. And so here we are incentivizing industrial development in these places. And that area also contains wetlands. So the wetlands are going away in all of these places. I think, you know, you heard Mona say that the Port Authority is only offering incentives for some tiny portion of mitigation, but they're going to go based on the Army Corps definition of wetlands, which excludes most of our wetlands. And so I want everyone to know that this is a choice we're making, and I would urge you all to really look at the groundwater issues before it's too late, because I'm afraid we're going down a path that actually will contribute to the death of Great Salt Lake. And it's us incentivizing these data centers and all this industrial development. Thanks.
Thanks, Tita. Steve Erickson online. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yes, just to amplify what Dita said about groundwater in the West Desert. The West Desert Watershed Council at their last meeting a couple of weeks ago endorsed a proposal to prioritize for funding for next year a updated study of the Tooele Valley groundwater aquifer situation. UGS has a queue of studies lined up, and they often are quite expensive to conduct, a lot of research necessary. And we wanted to see if we could get a bump up in that queue for taking a hard look at the water levels in the groundwater in Tooele Valley. May get back to you later about perhaps an endorsement from GSLAC as we go forward.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Good comment. Any other public comments? Yes, back here.
Hi, David O'Leary, U.S. Geological Survey. I just want to remind folks, we have a groundwater model for the Great Salt Lake Basin that's going to be ready for draft. It should be draft format completed this fall. And so, again, it's touching on a lot of these topics. So I just want to remind folks that that's coming. It will be publicly available. It can be downscaled. That's, it's done by USGS in ModFlow, which is publicly available, so people can take it, do what they want. So just a reminder that's upcoming, and we can provide updates as folks want.
Timely comment. Thanks, David. Appreciate that. Any additional public comments? If not, I'll go ahead and close public comment. Oh, do we have another one? Brad?
Yeah,
oh, you're
sorry.
good. You're
kinda
good, man. You don't have to do public comment. You can do just comment as a liaison.
I can just comment regularly?
Yeah, so actually let's do that. I'm gonna close public comment just to keep it that, and then we typically do have a bullet. We have an agenda item just for other items from council members liaison. So Brad, take it away.
So with the Northwest Urbana Shoshone Nation, we're gonna host what we're calling Wuda Ogwamia Ditsipa. It means Bear River to Great Salt Lake. We're going to be hosting a lunch and learn on August 27th at 10 a.m. My fabulous assistant has brought flyers. We'll provide lunch. What we're aiming to do is to update people on where we are, what we're doing, how we're doing it, where we're getting our funding, and allow some of the college students that have been working with us to present some of their ideas through a poster boarding event, and we will have presentations about what's going on. A lot of this stems from the freeze on our $4.2 million from the NIFWIF America the Beautiful Challenge has actually come through. So we're getting our 4.2 million, which will add pretty much everything else we wanted to do at the site. And so we have numbers that we need to share. So it'll be a really cool event. It's at our office. Our library is about 8,000 square feet. So we'll be able to host a few people. But Angela, if we can get you to, Maria will work with you to see if we can get some things sent out to people. And so you'll just see emails here and there, but we just want to invite you out to that. Thank you.
It's great, Brad. Looks like a great event. Hopefully get a lot of folks out for that. So appreciate that. I'd also note Blake Bingham had to sign off with the state engineer's office, but he wanted to pass on that they're having a public meeting to discuss the Great Salt Lake Distribution Management Plan. This is pretty important. This is how water gets administered by the state engineer's office relative to Great Salt Lake. They are holding a meeting on that July 31st at 6 p.m. DNR auditorium. Okay, we'll try maybe in the notes to do that or pass around a reminder, but that's again July 31st, 6 p.m. at DNR Auditorium to discuss the Great Salt Lake Distribution Management Plan. This is a plan that's required by an act the legislature passed this last session. Representative Snyder passed that bill. Any other items that council members or liaisons would like to bring up before we adjourn? If not, again, I want to thank everybody for your attendance today. These are always great meetings, and with the lighter agenda, we had some really good discussion today. So appreciate the engagement. Appreciate all that each of you are doing in your respective spheres for the lake, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. Just a reminder that our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, September 10th, and that's going to be right here at the usual time. Usual place. And then you can see on the agenda the other our typical agenda, just reminders there. Okay, with that, can I get a motion to, thanks again everybody, motion to adjourn? Okay, so moved, and a second from Darren. All in favor, say aye. Aye, that motion carries. We are adjourned. Thanks again everybody, and thanks again to all those who participated online.